Welcome to Amrita by the Book. My name is Amrita and this is my booktube, and today I will be reading 1-star reviews of some of my favorite reads over the past year. I have wanted to do this video ever since I saw my very first example. I thought it was brilliant and hilarious, and I am really looking forward to this. My first pick is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir, which is one of my favorite fantasy debut novels over the past year, and I did a full review of it. You can check that out. But when I was reviewing it, and even as I was reading it, I knew that this was going to be a tough sell for a great many people, and I was very upfront about that. So I'm really interested to see what other people have to say. So let's get into it. Okay, this person says, in December, I stopped reading with my thoughts being that I was intrigued by the story, but the writing was not for me. It felt sort of heavy-handed and very hard to get through, confusing even. So now I read the whole Act 1, and while my opinion on the writing did not change, I started to lose a bit of my interest in the story. The next person is a YouTuber, and they say they feel very strongly about their 1-star rating. This book suffers from the Tor hype, as did The Ruin of Things, which I also highly disliked. The writing is a mess. Characters' names are Niwingo. The main character is an absolute ass. She gets the chance to get off the planet and her literal response is go suck a dick. This book tried so hard to be edgy and goth with skellies and dead and absolutely failed. This next person says that they were really looking forward to it, but unfortunately it was a complete letdown, which breaks my queer little heart. The next person just says very simply, I didn't get it. I almost drowned in the snark and the quote clever, quote witty dialogue. They also say that I don't normally rate books I can't finish, but I will have to from now on to prevent the Goodreads recommendation algorithm from recommending similar books to this one. Wow, really hate it. The next person wasn't even going to review it, but they saw a lot of positive ratings, and while they're seeing a few more critical ones, they wanted to add their voice to this. So what's this book about? Honestly, I have no idea. The book simultaneously infodumps and gives a lack of info to the reader. Also seem to be confused that there are spaceships for some reason. I was left supremely confused by everything relating to this world. I couldn't keep them straight, especially when each character was referred to by at least 3 names. Gideon is called Gideon Nav, or Griddles. Then there are, and this is a small sampling from the 9th house, Harrowhawk Nonagesimus, Peliamena Novenarius, who is Harrowhawk's mom, Ortis Nijanad, and Sister Lacrimota. I didn't have a chance in hell with the names. The rest of the reviews basically continue in this vein, and okay, let's boil this down. Okay, so the common complaints for this book appear to be A, the writing, which I will discuss in a moment. 2, there was too much hype around this book. And then the third is that it did not meet expectations. Now the last one, look, that's a you problem, to be extremely blunt. If you have expectations for something and it doesn't meet it, then that's on you. If there's one thing that we should all have learned in 2020, it's to never, ever have expectations because whoo, child. So I can't do anything about that. The hype thing, I get, like Tor does do a lot of hype, but can I just tell you, as somebody that grew up in the 90s with people mocking me because I liked fantasy and just asking me if my favorite book was The Wizard of Oz, it is amazing to me to be living in a world where the complaint is that a fantasy publisher is overhyping things. It blows my mind that there is hype, much less overhype. So maybe again, this is like a me thing, so I can't really relate. But also that's how algorithms work, you know, like I have mentioned several times that there are books that constantly appear on my Instagram feed or on my Twitter feed, and then there will be people who watch those videos and be like, wow, I never even heard about this. And that's because that's how the algorithm is personalized. So if you think something is overhyped, then it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So Tor is doing the best it can, as it should, for titles that it publishes, but also it's because the algorithm thinks that you might be really interested in that. And again, that is based upon your behavior. Now, the quirky writing bits, I do agree. Like, I can see why that would annoy people. I said that in my own review, and I am just going to read a little bit, you know, like from Goodreads, where they have the Q&A session where you can ask a question of the author and they can respond. I'm just going to read her response to something that somebody left in that section, just so that you understand where all this is coming from. And she doesn't write in the exact same voice for Gideon the Ninth, but I think it gives a really great insight into the way that she thinks and the way that she processes her answers and things. So, and also I thought that it was charming and funny. So, but then I liked the book. So somebody in the section said that they were really looking forward to reading this book and to buying it for themselves, but then they realized that it wasn't going to come out until September, and they were a little bit bummed about it. And this is how Tamsyn Muir responded. That's lovely to hear, and I am not unsympathetic to your plight. With that in mind, here are some suggestions. Number 1, increase your body weight by 30%, create a den, hibernate until September. Difficult if you're not both bears, but have a go. Number 2, entertain yourselves in the meantime by writing your own copy of Gideon the Ninth. If you think it might be better than the actual Gideon the Ninth, keep it quiet. I don't need the competition. Number 3, tell my publisher that you are 100% certain that it's September and that you need a copy available to buy. This is a difficult con and relies on you traveling to their offices and changing all the calendars, which is also trespassing and may get you arrested. I guess this is the wild card. Maybe don't do this one. Number 4. If you or your adult are on Twitter, I'm giving away galleys of this thing every month. Easiest option, but does require luck and having an opinion on things like bones and swords. Whichever option you decide to go with, I hope that whenever you end up with a copy of the book, you have an A+ reading time. Sorry about the wait. Now see, to me that is funny, but also in my review of Gideon the Ninth, I said that it sort of mimics, it doesn't mimic, but it has really strong links to the way that we speak on the internet. And this is what I mean, you know, it has a sort of quippiness to it that is very familiar and comforting to me and that I find really funny. So if you're a Redditor or something, then maybe you'd find this book funny, but if you're not and you're used to something a little bit more conventional, a little bit more old school, and I have every sympathy for people like that. Like, I am one of those people too. Like, I like both things, I guess. But yeah, so if you don't have a high tolerance for that tone and for that exact type of quirk, then Gideon the Ninth is hard, and I fully sympathize. And you're not wrong. Okay, next up is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, which is a book that I have been plugging in, I feel like every single video that I have made since I read the book. So now it's time for my comeuppance. So this person says that they were attracted to the book because it was written by Richard Osman, and also they thought the concept was brilliant. But they're sorry to say that I found The Thursday Murder Club to be a very poor novel. The plot is plodding and disinteresting, and the characters are, on the whole, thinly veiled stereotypes. We have the fraudulent priest, the super-capitalist property mogul, the socialist rabble-rouser, the hard-working polished builder, the midlife crisis policeman. I could go on. And whilst it's probably unfair to say that it's lazy, I think the characters needed to have something more original about them. The next person is a fan of the cozy murder mystery novels, but they think that it lacks the charm of a good cozy. My biggest gripe about this book, too many characters and subplots. I just ended up horribly lost and confused. No thanks. The next person is also along the same lines. Richard Osman then feels the need to introduce us to 50 other characters for seemingly no reason whatsoever. The narrative jumps about so much it's difficult to remember anyone's name, much less become invested in anyone's individual story. I've seen a lot of people saying that actually the murder plot is totally secondary to all of the intricacies of the relationships between the characters in the retirement village. This would have been fine, but not enough time is actually spent exploring any of these relationships. It was all very surface level, and the fact that there's a new chapter every 2 pages from a different character's point of view makes it all feel disjointed, like flicking through the TV channels really quickly without actually getting more than 2 seconds of a dialogue every time. The book is sold as a murder mystery, but it's a weird and meandering investigation that we get from multiple sides. We get the murder club's version of events, then we get a bumbling police detective's version of events. Oh, he's not a bumbling detective. Then we get what actually happened. This could have been interesting, but it was left so flat. Another person says that I found it slow, waffly, lacking in style, and just so boring. As for the humor and laugh aloud moments, well, I smiled twice. A very basic, unsophisticated read. Very disappointing. Another person says, so boring, too many characters. However, my absolute biggest complaint was the POV shifts. Way too many, and it even jumps from third person to first person diary. Very confusing. You get the idea. So I think the common complaints for this one is that there are too many characters and subplots. Plus it has a slow pace and the murder is actually secondary. Now, the murder being secondary is actually a feature and not a bug of a good cozy murder mystery, because you really spend your time, I mean, you do wonder about who did the murder, of course, and you do want to find out who done it, but you actually spend most of the book following these different characters and looking at them interact and getting a bit of their backstory, and it's really a psychological drama that is unfolding in front of you, and that is my favorite part of a good cozy murder mystery. So in that, I can't be bothered too much about the fact that the murder is secondary. That's fine by me. The slow pace thing was like really interesting, because you'd think that the people who found there to be too many shifts in points of view or too many characters would appreciate that the book took its time, because it needs that time to set up all these different people and make you understand like why or what their points of view is adding to the story. And I really like the fact that it takes its own time to tell the story, rather than being like, well, this happened, then this happened, and then this happened. It gives a sense of time and place, you know, like it tells you what happened 50 years ago, you know, what it was like before all these people came here. It gives you a sense of history and place, and a sense of just how things have changed, not just for the people, but also for the place. And that is one of my favorite parts of this book, so I have to disagree there. As for there being too many characters, I mean, there are 4 main characters and we do jump back and forth between them. And the personal diary belongs to Joyce, who is basically our narrator. But the way the book is set up, Joyce narrates what's happening with the murder investigation, and then we have the main narrator of the book who is telling you the overall arc. Is that confusing to people? Like it wasn't for me. I thought it was this very clear, especially because Joyce's diary entries are literally in first person, where she's talking about like, oh, I'm Joyce and this is what's happening in my life. But then also perhaps I'm the wrong person to complain to when it comes to too many characters, because I am a fantasy reader and I am used to people with like difficult names and, you know, 700 million of them per book. So I am, again, not that bothered, but maybe other people might be. Fair enough. I do want to call out that one person who said it was unsophisticated. Like, I don't know what they mean. What are you even talking about? Next up is Slippery Creatures by KJ Charles, and at first I was really chuffed because there was only like 17 1-star reviews, and then I realized it's because she's an indie author and she doesn't get as much traction as people who are published by one of the big publishers. But it was fun because one of the complaints was, this is a book about a gay man and I am not a gay man. And I was like, I suppose I should have expected that, but I'm glad that there was just one of those. This other person is basically, they don't like the characters. Will's not stupid, but lets himself get played when it couldn't be more blatant. I disliked Kim and don't understand trusting him. For me, the book was boring. I kept getting a nostalgic hint of past mystery writers coupled with a strong impression Charles was writing in the style of, rather than doing her own thing and letting the story flow. The historical setting was more a lecture on the times than anything that elicited feeling. I don't think so. Another person says, I hate to say it, but this was awful and I couldn't finish the book. There wasn't one likable character in this book that I could cheer for. The love interest was passionless and took forever to get going, and I hated the back and forth to the uninspiring bookshop and all of the henchmen asking about the information. I really hoped that this would be great, as I've loved many other KJ Charles books, but it read like it had been thrown together. Passionless. Will someone explain to me why this is so beloved? The chemistry between Will and Kim was not believable. I'm supposed to buy that after two strangers threatened Will, demanding the information, he suddenly opens up to the third stranger? Also, the plot was a bit convoluted. The writing was okay, but at times prosy. Again, continuing on the theme, here the characters are flat and unlikable, the relationship unbelievable, and the plot boring. So I guess the common complaints here are that the characters are unlikable, the writing is too prosy, and the relationship is unbelievable. So the fact that the characters are unlikable is actually part of why I think a lot of us like the series, because they're both so damaged by their experiences, and then they meet each other and they really can't even believe that they can trust in this other person. And of course, it doesn't help that Kim is basically a liar. So you're just like, I get why people are talking about how this relationship is unbelievable, because Kim is so slippery. Will is basically Charlie Brown and Kim is Lucy, and they're just setting up for that football kickoff every single time. But there is a line of sweetness between the two of them, like they have found each other and they can't really trust it or trust themselves. And there is so much going on outside of them that they can't ignore, and they have to balance the things that they feel for each other with their prior commitments, that it becomes really difficult. So I do agree on the unlikable characters. I do not agree that it is preachy in any way, unless you mean, Will saying things like war is bad, and you can't trust the government when it's sending its young men off to war to get killed for things that make no sense in retrospect. I mean, that's all true. I mean, it really aligns with things that I believe in, so I guess I'm not the best person to be making that point too. So another one of the books that I read over the past year and I thought was rather enjoyable was The Priory of the Orange Tree. It wasn't my favorite, but I do believe I enjoyed it. So here's what the 1-star reviews say. An overhyped book. I hope you have not expected anything more than 2 stars from me. Spoiler, they gave them 1 star. Another person says, The Priory of the Orange Tree is plastered all over Goodreads and seems to have been heralded as the next big thing in fantasy. It's been given the Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings label, and although I should know better and stay away from anything tagged with deserves to be as big as Game of Thrones, sometimes I'm just a sucker for hype. Honey, aren't we all? The next one really hurts. It says, a bloated leaden behemoth, lacking in any originality, character development, engaging plot, or good writing. Wow, tell me how you feel. If anyone compares this to The Lord of the Rings or A Game of Thrones, throw this book at their heads. Maybe it will knock some sense into them. Harsh but fair. Another person sort of agrees. They say boring, long and drawn out, underdeveloped, flat characters, anticlimactic, simple and trying to trick you to think it's epic by being so freaking long. Filler, filler, filler. I mean, it goes on for quite a bit, but I think you get the gist of it. People do not like this book. So the common complaints over here seem to be that it's overhyped, that it was compared to Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, and that it is boring and overwritten. Now, is it overhyped? Yes, but like I said, I am so thrilled to be living in a world where my problems are things like, ooh, this fantasy book, it has too much marketing, as compared to like when I was a teen and people were making fun of me for reading a fantasy book. So this is great. This is not a problem that I have. You want to overhype fantasy books to me? Please do it all the time and twice on Sundays. I will not complain. Second is the Lord of the Rings / Game of Thrones thing. And I think I mentioned that in my review on my Bookstagram. And yeah, that's something that does bother me. That bothers me about a lot of books. I think it's lazy and it's overutilized and it doesn't even make sense. Like, it's literally like, is it epic fantasy? Oh great, it's like Lord of the Rings or it's like Game of Thrones. And I'm like, no, those books have very specific tone and they have a very specific feel, and not everything is like that. And as the reviews of this book suggest, what it actually ends up doing is the opposite of what marketing wants, which is that it pisses people off. Don't tell them this book is like this other book if it's not like that, because then the fans of that other book are going to pick up this book and then be really angry. That makes no sense to me. Stop it. The last is that it's boring. Well, that is not something that, I mean, that's a very subjective thing to say, you know what I mean? I don't believe it's as badly written as most people are making it out to be. I think it's just the comparisons that do it a disservice. I can't remember, but I think the author is a debut novelist. So it does suffer from debut novel issues. But believe me, this is by no means as bad as some of the stuff out there. And I didn't think it was boring. I think it went on a little longer than it ought to have. But again, that is something that you should address to their editor, because that's why you have an editor. Next up is one of my favorite nonfiction books that I read last year, and that's Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. And I was in two minds whether or not I wanted to read the one-star reviews of this, because it's a book about, you know, Black women and race, and about how they've been left behind in the feminist movement. And this would just bring out the worst in people on a good day. So I wasn't sure if I really wanted to engage with that stuff. But then I called myself out for being a coward and waded in to see what the good readers of Goodreads have to say. Although I do want to say that I'm not saying that everyone who disliked this book is a racist. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. Okay, the first person DNF'd it, and they seem to have a problem with the methodology over the science. They say, for now, I'll say that I regret having given time over to this. It could have been good, but the editors failed the author, and the author failed the work. Like I said, don't bother. Better stuff is already out there that addresses this subject. They don't actually mention what that other stuff is. If they had, I might have actually rated this review a lot better than I actually do. Next, they say this started out strong and I was really excited. However, a few pages in and it was downhill from there. First of all, I question the authenticity of her perspective. It comes off a little contrived and not well researched. I wish there were more personal stories from her, or of those she knew. It was very dry and non-inspiring. I don't even know where to go with that. Next person says, unpopular opinion, but I feel this adds nothing new to the conversation. I wasn't aware we were having a conversation about most of this stuff. The next person says that they were really excited to start this book, especially because they saw that it addressed food insecurity as a feminist issue. But overall, the writing was clumsy, had many generalizations, and used lots of repetitive terms. The author's title was misleading since the book offered no notes from anyone forgotten by a movement other than herself. That's a good burn. I don't think it's accurate, but it's a good burn. Next person says, I stopped reading this because I felt I was being lectured. I strive to be an ally, but at some point all the finger pointing and blaming is just too much to take. Sweetie, I think you're the person that needs to read this book. And there are several other people who agree with her. This book talks at you. Sometimes I found it difficult. I didn't find the information hard to digest, but just that apparently all the woes of the world apparently come down to feminism, specifically white women. I also would have liked some footnotes, references for any numbers thrown out, while the ones I looked up were on point, and that made me sad because the numbers are heartbreaking and eye-opening. At times it was too much and hard to continue to believe. Lady. Okay, the common complaints for this one appear to be too preachy, not personal enough, or too personal, and that it's badly written. First off, the preachiness, yeah. She's pointing out what's wrong with the system and who are the people who are complicit in the system and how you should address it. This is not like oh, let us all go together. This is, let us stop here and look at the differences between you and me and how it's benefiting you way more than it's benefiting me. Next up, with the personal perspective, like, I don't know what people want. Like, I feel like we as a culture really get off on personal pain, and that seems to be the marketing point for a lot of these books and issues that come up. Like, it's like, if you yourself have not suffered, or if you can't tell me and convince me that you are in pain and give me just amazing details about it, then I can't empathize with you, and therefore I don't believe you. And I think that is just whacked. These are not anecdotal items. These are systemic issues. And we don't need to feed off the pain of others to understand right from wrong. You shouldn't have to explain to me in great detail how you suffered sexual violence for me to understand that sexual violence is wrong. It's as simple as that. And the last complaint about it being badly written, I think Mikki Kendall is a pretty great writer. I mean, she writes things that are understandable. I do agree about the footnotes and references though, but not because I feel like the work lacks authority without them, but because I am always in favor of footnotes and references, and I want more books to incorporate them, and it allows the reader to diversify their own reading and expand their own understanding of a subject, and that is something that we should all be striving for. And last up is Say Yes to the Duke by Eloisa James, who writes historical romance, and her books took me through the pandemic last year, and I really appreciate them. So let's see what people have to say about this one. Wow, the first person is in all caps. I swear to effing God, if I'm given one more shit-ass book with bad conflict, random twee pets for no reason, and everyone discovering canceral capitalist feminism 100 years too early, I will burn a barn down and start campaigning against suffrage for romance writers specifically. Look, I could read more reviews of this particular book, but I feel like nothing quite matches the rage and the depth of this particular review. So the common complaints about this book appear to be there are nonsense characters, there is a terrible handling of crippling anxiety, and that it's boring. And you know what? You're right. The characters don't always make sense. And I don't usually read one-star reviews. I mean, I don't usually read reviews as such, but reading those reviews did remind me that I have become really good at going along with a lot of the nonsense that this genre sometimes puts up, specifically from the authors who write things that I like. I will put up with a lot of things for banter and apparently nonsensical characters who do not perform according to the internal logic of the book is one of them. The second thing is far more serious, which is that the author really doesn't seem to know how to handle characters with crippling anxiety. I mean, the character in this book that they're talking about literally vomits before they have to be in a social situation. I mean, that's really, really bad anxiety. And then well, I don't want to spoil the book in case anyone is planning to read it, but it just magically goes away at certain points and then comes back, and it makes no sense. And I think it's supposed to be that, you know, when you're with the person that you're supposed to be or the person that makes you feel most at home with yourself, then little things like mental health issues magically vanish, which is a really stupid take in 2021 or 2020, which is when this book came out. So yes, you're all correct. And the last one is that it is boring, and I'm sorry, but Eloisa James has never written a boring novel. You can dislike her, you can dislike the things that she does in her books, you can dislike her as a person, but you know what? She does good banter, and banter will always carry the day, at least in my estimation, so no, I don't think it's boring. So this was my roundup, and I must be a masochist because I really enjoyed it. I might just have to do it for like other books. But thank you for watching, and let me know if you've read any of the books in this list and whether you agree with the 1-star reviews. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.